Welcome to the Fulcrum Point, the podcast that's all about Catholic education in Western Washington, how that's impacting students and families and our entire community. This show is brought to you by the Fulcrum Foundation, and I'm your host, Brian Callanan. Our program this week is going to cover some challenging topics. How are Catholic schools in our region reacting after a shooting at a school-wide mass at the Church of the Annunciation in Minneapolis? There's an outpouring of support from Western Washington going to Minnesota, and there are some very tough conversations happening about student safety, too. Plus, what could be a huge change in the way education is funded in our country with a new federal school choice tax credit program. Will our state opt into this? What do Catholic schools stand to gain? How will this affect public schools? A controversial issue to discuss. And after 4 years of growth in Catholic school enrollment in Western Washington, what's going on this fall? Well, we're just getting started with the school year, but it is already time for a big test on those questions and more for the Superintendent of the Office for Catholic Schools, Nicho Ford. I'm talking to him next, right here on the Fulcrum Point.
Hi, I'm Susan Okoma, Programs Director for the Fulcrum Foundation. Thanks to our donors, Fulcrum is providing a record-breaking nearly $4 million in tuition assistance to support students across Western Washington this school year. This support is transforming the lives of thousands of young people through access to high-quality Catholic education. We're especially grateful to Joe and Lucy Edmonds, whose unprecedented investment in our tuition assistance grant program exemplifies the spirit of compassion and commitment that drives our mission forward. Thank you to every donor who has made this possible. Your support is not only funding education, it's creating brighter futures.
Nicholas, very good to be with you again, and as long as we don't talk about the fact that our alma maters are playing each other in football this weekend, I think we're going to have a very nice discussion.
I'd agree, Brian. Yeah. I do think, we'll keep that on the side.
It's got to be on the Cal Bears, the BC Eagles. We'll see what goes on there. At any rate, I did want to start by talking about the start of the school year. What's going on with the 74 schools in the Archdiocese? What's new? Where are you focusing your attention this fall?
Well, it's been another year of growth for us. That's what we're on track for. We're still confirming our final numbers, but early projections, when we look at our forecast, is that for the 6th year in a row, we're going to have experienced growth, which has been just phenomenal. We look at where that's been happening around the country. Last year, we were the 6th fastest growing district when we look at the top 20 largest dioceses. Of those, the first 5 have some type of a school choice option. So we have something else going on here in this archdiocese that we're really proud of. That's bringing people into our schools, continuing to choose Catholic education.
And we're going to touch a little bit more on school choice in just a little bit, but I did want to talk about why that's happening, why you think that continued enrollment is going on. Is it what scientists call the Nicho Ford factor? Is that what's going on here? What do you got?
I can say affirmatively it is not the Nicho Ford factor. I do think, though, it has to do with our leadership. One of the noteworthy trends for the Archdiocese is thinking about 10 years ago and what the trend has been across the nation with regards to enrollment. We're the 3rd in terms of our enrollment growth. And while we haven't grown over the course of the 10 years, we have this trend, and it coincides with the beginning of our Building Leadership Capacity initiative. And a real focus to recognizes that behind strong Catholic schools are strong Catholic school leaders. From there, everything cascades: strong academics, strong faith formation. People want to be part of those communities. And so with that initiative kind of taking root and taking off, I do think there's something to be said about the leaders that we have in our Catholic schools, the confidence they instill in their communities, and the growth that we are seeing as a result of that.
Yeah, this is a big part of that professional development that we've talked about on this podcast before. It sounds like it's coming to fruition because when you have people that are invested in these schools, like teachers, principals, or whatever else, I think it does encourage more families to be a part of that. Is that what you're talking about?
It is, and we're seeing it. There's lots of positive indicators. Certainly enrollment growth is one major area, but the other area where we're seeing positive numbers is in our teacher retention. This past year, we had a 9% reduction in the number of postings. We kept 92% of our faculty and staff last year. So it's a really big indicator where the nationwide average in Catholic schools is around 85%. To be trending toward 90% shows that, again, teachers and staff want to be in our schools. And all of this is potential. It has this flywheel effect where the momentum is good.
Yeah, and I look at that, too, when you compare what teachers are making at the Catholic school level, what they could make at the public school level. There's a pretty big discrepancy. Public school teachers get paid more, and yet you're still able to hang on to these teachers in Catholic schools. What do you think that means?
I think we take care of our teachers, and we think about who they are holistically and their overall well-being. One of my favorite expressions is recognizing that the grass is not always greener on the other side. The grass is greener where it's watered. And I think where our schools do a great job is thinking about the formation of the individual teacher and what is their professional development? How are they supported in and out of the classroom? And then I think a special part of being in a Catholic school environment is also the faith formation that an individual receives as an adult and the ability to live your faith through your teaching ministry, but also to be formed in it. And that, I think, it inspires folks. And I read a lot of articles in the secular world and talking about business and the strategy of hope, what hope brings. And I think that's naturally imbued in.
It's baked in, right?
It's already baked in, is this idea that our schools foster hope and people want to belong to something that's showing hope, especially right now.
Yeah, no, I hear exactly what you're saying. I did want to talk about the start of the school year. Is there something new, innovative, and different that's happening in our Catholic schools right now? Are there any programs you're really keeping a focus on at the start of this fall?
The biggest thing that we've partnered with Seattle University in helping to launch is the Catholic School Teacher Corps. So that's the first year that we have teachers in the Seattle U program. They are teachers who are in formation at Seattle U, but that are teaching in our schools as they are learning, and they are living in community together. So we were in partnership with Seattle U as they launched that program. We have a school on Capitol Hill, St. Joseph. They've just opened a new early learning center. So a useful area to think about a broader partners in the gospel. That's our Archdiocesan initiative of thinking about how we are church today, but thinking about where can we maximize our facility utilization to really expand the reach of our Catholic schools. And then I think we are just continuing to invest in our leadership initiatives, in particular around our Grace Teacher Leadership Program. This year, again, a focus on universal design for learning. And what that really is how do we serve every learner? How do we expand the scope of students that we can serve and serve well?
You're talking about students that might have different needs in the classroom? Is that where
Absolutely,
you're going?
yeah. Students with different learning needs, behavioral needs, and the way that we support them is teachers and staff who can implement and guide instruction for a larger swath of the population. And we do recognize, approximately 13% of our population comes to us with some form of diagnosis. And we want to figure out how do we serve each of those students well within the broader population, and really focusing on a system of inclusion where it's not a standalone classroom or standalone programs, but really integrated in a way that truly reflects, what we talk about as the kingdom of God.
We actually talked with Eastside Catholic in their program that really invites kids into the classroom with different needs over this past year, and fascinating to look at there. I did want to talk about looking towards the future and how you continue this momentum you're talking about. I know it's also difficult to continue growth like this, and we're in an unsettled economy as well. Talk to me about that and where you're heading and how you want to guide this type of growth into the future.
I think when we think about our schools and what is attracting families into Catholic schools, we know academics and the care for the child is important. We know that the formation of values is key to it. We know that it's community, that it's the sense of family and belonging that students feel. And then that we have schools where people feel safe, where they feel, that their students can go and be free and learn. And that's an important part of all of this, is that students learn best when they feel a sense of belonging and they feel a sense of safety. They can really thrive in that learning environment. People are drawn to that.
I think so too. And we're going to talk a little bit more about safety in just a bit here. Time for a brief break. When we return, a discussion about the tragic shooting at Annunciation Catholic Church in Minneapolis, how our region is reaching out to help that community heal, and also the questions our local Catholic schools are asking about student safety. That's next on The Fulcrum Point.
Hi, I'm Dave Mayer, Director of Early Childhood Education for the Seattle Archdiocese Office for Catholic Schools. We are proud to support 57 early learning programs across our Archdiocese, serving infant through pre-K children, and we're still growing. This year, we aspire to add even more classrooms to serve early learning students and to meet the need of this important programming in our parish communities, giving kids a great start on their education journey. If you'd like to learn more about our early learning programs, head to mycatholicschool.org.
Welcome back to The Fulcrum Point, where we're talking with Nicholas Ford, the superintendent of the Office for Catholic Schools, and it's time to discuss a difficult topic, the shooting at Annunciation Church in Minnesota on August 27th. Fletcher Merkel, age 8, Harper Moisky, age 10, were killed when a gunman opened fire on an all-school mass during the first week of classes. 17 other people were hurt. The gunman, a former student at Annunciation, took his own life. Nicholas, I have asked this question of so many different people in our community. What was your first thought when you heard about this shooting?
I think my first thought was just heartbroken, but incomprehensible. It was difficult to put all the pieces back together. School shootings, whenever they occur, are tragic, but to have this happen in a Catholic school that we consider, part of our broader family, and in particular to have the principal at Annunciation, Matt DeBoer, a former colleague of ours in the Archdiocese, to have that personal connection, this one hit home for me in a different way than others have. And just, it's so real to be thinking about how to respond as a school leader, as a parent. That part just couldn't put really words to it.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's hard to make this connection, but I did want to talk about Matt DeBoer, the principal at Annunciation. He was a principal here in Seattle at St. Therese for 8 years before leaving for Minnesota 3 years ago. This is someone who's well known in Seattle's Catholic family. Can we talk about Matt?
Matt's just a faith-filled leader. He'd start whenever we presented and talked to our principal groups. Matt got up and we all knew what Matt was going to ask, which was just a reminder that God is good all the time and that all the time God is good.
Yep.
Matt brought that to each of us. Matt was one who led first with faith. Our school leaders are great spiritual leaders, but Matt in particular, that was his cares and that's his gift and what he brought to the community. He led with joy. He led with a sense of purpose and really led with community.
Yeah.
He brought people together and had a way of uniting. So when I think about Matt in this time, in this role, I know he has the gifts from the Holy Spirit that are needed to be able to help heal a community as part of that work. Good friend, tremendous father, but just a really, when you think about a Catholic school leader, someone that, comes top of mind.
Yeah, and I just wanted to make sure I mentioned something that he said on the day of the shooting. It really struck me. Here's what he said. We can't change the past, but we can do something about the future. There's an African proverb that says, when you pray, move your feet. So I beg you and I ask you to please pray, but don't stop with your words. What message did you get from that, Nicholas? How are schools here in Western Washington, in the Archdiocese, responding to that plea to move your feet?
We thought about what that looks like here in the Archdiocese and what does it look like to move our feet along with our prayer. So we've launched an initiative in the Archdiocese that we call it Move Your Feet. And it's a goal to really think about how do we remain in solidarity with Annunciation over the course of this entire school year. Beyond that as well, these wounds don't heal fast.
Right.
But it's important for us that we keep them close in prayer throughout the year in the actions that we're doing, but then also thinking about what are the ways that we continue to prepare our schools? What are the ways that we continue to advocate for safety? I think about the teachers that we have in our classrooms, what they are tasked with. From everything that we've heard, the students, the teachers acted so heroically on that day. And yet that's because the teachers have to take part in training their students how to react when they're being shot at. And I think part of our work in Move Your Feet is, in addition to praying, is raising awareness of what it would look like to be in a country where our teachers don't have to bear that stress on a daily basis.
That's a deep topic there. And I know also in terms of the outreach some of the different schools are doing here, my home parish, Our Lady of Guadalupe in West Seattle, Go Bulldogs, a shout out to that school. And Lauren Hobbs, they actually have a situation where the music teacher at the school in West Seattle is reaching out to the music teacher out there at Annunciation. So I think they're trying to get some letters exchanged, things of that nature, just to let people know in Minnesota that there is a family here that is thinking about them. Can you talk about that piece, that connection?
I think in general, we're trying to reach out to Matt to show him that, we are walking with him in this step along the way. As our schools put these projects together and think about what it is in particular that we can do this year, whether it's a particular project, whether it's something that spans the year, that these things are happening. And then we are going to collect all of these different signs of solidarity, these signs of continuing to walk with the community at Annunciation, walk with Matt, gather them and bring them to Minneapolis.
Yeah.
This spring after Easter, Minneapolis was named, the host of the National Catholic Education Association's annual conference.
Right.
They'll have anywhere from, 5,000 to 10,000 educators descend upon their city for this major conference, so that it's there. We have this physical opportunity to go to Minneapolis, share, this gift, this memory of what our year has looked like as a sign, a physical sign of the prayerful solidarity that our schools have really leaned into over the course of the next 10 months.
Yeah, it's going to be a very emotional moment, I have to think. And I know that there are some leaders from the Fulcrum Foundation actually heading out to Minnesota in the next couple of weeks here, connecting with Fulcrum's counterpart organization in Minnesota for an annual fundraiser, which I think is going to be a very emotional moment too. Again, just a lot of connections being forged right there. But I did want to get down to the nitty-gritty here with you, Nicholas, if I could. Shootings, very rare at religious schools, but with this incident, so many people have asked me, could it happen here in our Catholic schools? How do we protect ourselves and our kids? What's happening on that front? What are you telling people?
Our schools are not immune to this epidemic of gun violence. I think what I tell our families, what I try to tell our parents when I have the opportunity, certainly our educators, is that's not what we can guarantee. We can't guarantee that this will not happen. What we can provide assurance about is that we are going to work diligently to ensure that our facilities are as safe as we can, that we're going to make sure that we're training in best practices, that we are walking through tabletop exercises, engaging in the appropriate drills for our faculty and our staff to be able to respond in the event of an emergency, supporting our students where at their age level it's appropriate to ensure that they can respond. The other thing that we are doubling down on that we continue to support is that when we come into our Catholic schools, that we ensure that our students know that they are loved and seen and known, that they feel a sense of belonging. It's a gift of Catholic schools that we have the ability to know so many students, that we travel with these students over the course of 9 years, oftentimes in our elementary schools. Many of them will then go to our high schools. But thinking about even in those instances where we have large schools, small schools, that our students know they are known, and then that we're spending the time investing in the curriculums to really engage in the social and emotional well-being of our students and the spiritual well-being, because I do think when students don't feel that same sense of community and that sense of belonging, and there's this hurt, there's something at the root that drives someone to do something so horrendous, so tragic, and trying to understand what that is. So I think it's that we commit to loving our students, that we commit to knowing them, that we do commit to best practices in the field, that we commit to continuing to invest in our facilities, that where there are opportunities for improvements, that we tackle those. And then that we do continue to profess, the dignity of life. And as a teaching of the church is to recognize, that how can we turn away from violence? How do we turn toward peace? Pope Leo has continued in advocating for that same thing that Pope Francis has, and that all of the popes and really the religious community have advocated for, is how do we dialogue? How do we work together? How do we use our voices instead of, turning to acts of extreme violence?
Yeah, such a deep story. Again, a former Annunciation student who was the gunman in this situation. It comes down to me, Nicholas, to this idea of balance. How do you balance the need to keep students and families alert and aware when it comes to security, and yet also this idea to keep campuses as open and as inviting as I know you want them to be?
It is a tension. It's how do you keep them open, and where we walk through and we think about when we go through campuses, what we've had to do to lock doors, to close campuses when we can, to ensure that visitors are checking in, and what that looks like. In particular for us, thinking about the Mass and the celebration of the sacraments, a time and a space that's always been open and has been a unique opportunity to be able to melt in, and really thinking through those practices in particular of where do we need to create more security. Because at the end of the day, it is this delicate balance, and we do need to take what prevention we can and what steps we can to ensure that as much as possible we reduce these opportunities. But I think, again, having our teachers trained and prepared to be able to respond because of the unpredictability, and knowing that we don't know every opportunity or every hole in the system. So
right.
How do we respond thoughtfully with what it is? That's collaboration across schools with schools will reach out to their local law enforcement communities to help them revise their practices. It's an all-hands-on-deck approach.
Yeah, it has to be. Nicholas, thank you very much for that. More to come here on the podcast on yet another thorny topic, a federal tax credit scholarship program that could potentially bring a windfall of dollars to Catholic schools and private schools here in Western Washington and across the country. But it's not without its share of controversy. We'll explain coming up here on the Fulcrum Point.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Conklin, principal of Assumption St. Bridget's School in Northeast Seattle's Bryant neighborhood. We are a pre-K through 8th grade parish school who pride ourselves on challenging academics grounded in Catholic social teachings, along with comprehensive art offerings and a robust social-emotional curriculum. Outside of the classroom, our students enjoy CYO sports and after-school clubs. We celebrate an engaged parent community and welcome all faiths and backgrounds. Our admissions season for the next school year is happening now, and we encourage all families to visit our website to learn more and register for one of our upcoming open houses. It's a wonderful opportunity to meet ASB students, hear from current parents, and learn how we ensure our students graduate inspired to learn, called to serve, and prepared to lead.
Back once again with Superintendent Nicholas Ford here on the Fulcrum Point as we talk about a federal tax credit scholarship program, which was part of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act from President Trump. The way it works, people could donate up to $1,700 to nonprofit scholarship granting organizations and get a dollar-to-dollar tax break on their federal income taxes. The nonprofit would then use that money to create scholarships for students attending private or religious schools. The funds could also go towards a program run by a public school. States have to opt in to this program, and as it stands right now, Superintendent Chris Rakedahl has been vocal in his opposition to this idea, saying it essentially takes money away from our public schools. Nicholas, you were part of an op-ed on this topic a few weeks ago in the Seattle Times, urging the state to opt in to this program. What message are you trying to get across about this to students, parents, families, and I guess our state legislature too?
I think an important part of what we want to share is what the funds are and are not and where they come from. I think one of the important parts to clarify for everybody is that this does not shift any state dollars from public schools to private schools. I think our Catholic school system in general, since its founding, has always existed as a complement to the public school system in this country to serve students who may not have been served in a public school, but really to offer choice to parents of where their student is going to learn best. This is an opportunity for choice really on three levels. First, the governor's choice to opt into the program. The second is the donor's choice of whether they would like their federal tax dollars to go to the federal government outside, or whether they would like to direct them internally into the state to invest in education within the state, not only in Catholic schools. They might choose other organizations. I think an important part that you brought in was also recognizing that this is a program that benefits education, period. Public, private, religious, secular. The third level of choice is choice for the family, and this has certainly been a church teaching, is a belief that a family has the right to choose the best educational environment for the formation of their children, seeing the parent as the primary educator. So we have choice on those three areas. It doesn't impact our state. In fact, I think it's going to be a boon to the state. These are dollars that we're able to redirect back into our local economies to fund a not insignificant sector. When we think about our archdiocese serving over 21,500 students, and we represent the largest collection of independent private schools in the state. But when you round that out, it's a large contingent of educators. We support ourselves about 4,000 staff. We represent about a third of that population. So when you start to draw that out, it's a big part of that. One of the other areas that I've appreciated when the bill was going through reconciliation and it was, being amended, I think the change, some could see it as a limitation to change it from its original provision of allowing $5,000 or 10% of adjusted gross income to go toward this scholarship granting organization to $1,700. To me, $1,700 is more democratic. The governor opting into this program is going to allow Washingtonians to choose where that money can go. Many of us have at least a $1,700 tax burden to the federal government, and to be able to then have a little bit of say of how to direct that money, I think is impactful. And voters will choose whether or not they want to give to an organization. But it's also important to note that if the governor doesn't opt in, it doesn't limit a donor from making a donation to another, SGO, a scholarship granting organization outside of the state.
So keep the dollars here.
So let's keep the dollars here in Washington and continue to invest on that. The bill itself, there are many parts of it, and not all align with all of our beliefs as a church. And yet, where something has become law, there's an important part for us to recognize that how can we offer that opportunity to this state as part of the union to be able to further that.
Thank you. I want to make sure I go back and forth with you on a few issues here. This is a really thorny topic. I've heard some critics who might say, wait a minute, you're just giving a handout funded by taxpayers to people in wealthier families who are already sending their kids to private schools. You're using federal dollars to pay for private schools that are not regulated and accountable in the same way public schools are. I think that's one criticism I've heard a few times.
It's really important to recognize that this is not a handout. About a third of our students receive some form of tuition assistance, direct assistance. But it's also important to note that the average cost to educate here in the Archdiocese, for our elementary students in particular, is around $14,000. That compares to $17,000 of funding that our public schools receive per pupil. But it's also important to note, of that $14,000, approximately $10,000 of it is actually collected through tuition. The other $4,000 needs to be raised either through philanthropy, through grant writing. There's a lot else that has to happen. Most of our students are receiving already some form of subsidy. We are not serving a slice of, the most affluent in our communities. We really are serving all. Demographically, racially, and ethnically, our schools collectively look like the population in Western Washington. And I think economically, we have a more balanced demographic than I think most people understand. Our schools take great pride in making sure that they are accessible financially. These are not schools that are priced at $40,000 per student. These are schools that strive to be accessible financially. This is an important part. It complements the work that Fulcrum is doing already in granting tuition assistance to so many students. But to be able to then say to families, let's make this a little bit more of an opportunity for you to be able to contribute. Collectively, our diocese alone, we save the state's budget over $350 million. When you think about 21,000 students, $17,000 per pupil, that's not an insignificant way of demonstrating that, the complementary nature of our school system, upon which our parents are also contributing with their tax dollars to the state to be able to fund public education, because we do see them as complementary goods.
Okay, I wanted to make sure I push back on one more piece here, this idea that Catholic schools, they are taking in a very diverse population. I think that's true, but then public schools have to take everybody. Private schools, Catholic schools, they can choose who they want to admit. I think that's a difference here, and I wonder how you think about that piece of it.
It's a great question, Brian, and I think there is an element of admissions that we do have in our schools. I think our schools do strive to capture as many students as we can, regardless of their academic, perhaps their needs, their learning needs, their behavioral needs. And we don't serve all. I'll just name that. But I do want to recognize that, as I shared earlier, 13% of our students do come to us with some form of a diagnosis, whether that's, a specific learning disability, whether that's an intellectual disability, developmental disability. We do have learners of all types, and our schools are striving. We don't have access to the same pool of federal funding and state funding to support students with learning needs. And this is, again, where I think there is this complement of how do we balance. But as I talk with our principals, we really strive to say, how can we say yes to more? Because at the end of the day, our goal as a diocese is to make disciples of all nations, and it's hard to be all if you're excluding some.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I'm going to start wrapping up with you here, Nicholas, because I would love to hear if you have a concept about a healing path forward on this, because there's a lot of division on this topic. School choice is a major wedge issue between the two political parties in our country right now. Talk to me about that path forward. What might that look like?
I think a path forward is recognizing the opportunity for this scholarship opportunity to benefit all students, not just in Catholic schools, not just in private schools, but public schools as well, to be able to fund programs like band, like extra tutoring. It's not lost on me in this state that part of our conversation in this state is that education is underfunded. This is, again, an opportunity for us to redirect our dollars and to be able to say, where do we want our dollars to go when we think about contributing to the federal government? And do we want to vote with our feet to be able to say, we believe in education here, and how do we contribute to that? It's an all mentality for me. And to think about what Governor Ferguson is doing right now is striving to make education more equitable, more accessible. When we think about what he's recently signed with regards to higher education and accessibility, there is a concept of striving for more. And how do we highlight that on every level, including this tax credit opportunity?
Thanks so much for speaking with me, Superintendent Nicholas Ford of the Office for Catholic Schools.
Thank you for having me, Brian. It's been great to be with you.
Always. Thanks to everybody who's listening to this episode of the Fulcrum Point, where we're discussing the impact of Catholic schools across Western Washington. Download this podcast, share it with your friends, and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. This show is brought to you by the Fulcrum Foundation. You can learn more about their work at fulcrumfoundation.org. I'm Brian Callanan. It's been my pleasure to listen with you and learn. See you next time.